Hey everyone, welcome back to Watch and Carry. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to mount your Kush Hi Foot Pad to the front sensor. As you can see here, I'm running this both in the front and the rear. The rear installation is pretty basic. You're just going to remove your stock rear foot pad and replace it with the Kush Hi, and then use the 6 screws per the instructions that are included with the Kush Hi to secure it back in, and you're pretty much good to go. So for the front, that's the tricky one over here. So I'm going to start this video by showing you how to do the installation and the modification to your Kush Hi first. Once I get it installed, then I'll go ahead and just cover some basic, frequently asked questions that I can already, assume some people might have. So with your Kush Hi, what you're going to do is flip it over like that, and you're going to look at the link down below, and you're going to cut a piece of felt from that link in the following dimensions. So this felt is adhesive on one side and then soft on the other. You're looking for about 7.5 inches in length here and here. And then you're looking for 4 inches in width here and of course here. Okay, and then that's basically the only modification you need to do with the Kush Hi pad. We're going to set that down to the side. Then you're going to take your board over here. Let's get our stock foot pad into view. Okay, with the stock foot pad, you have 4 screws that secure this to the rail. So you have 1, 2, and then 2 longer ones that come in from the bumper. The 2 from the bumper, you're going to leave those alone. The 2 here, you're going to remove. You don't touch anything with the grip tape or the sensor. And that's pretty much it. Then you're going to get these 2 screws, which should come with the Kush Hi. These are machine screws with a flat head. Okay, and these are about 17 or 18 millimeters in length, so just find those in your Kush Hi kit, and you're just going to be using these 2. Okay, what you're going to do now is take your Kush Hi with your felt modification on the bottom, flip this over. You're going to insert the machine screw through the Kush Hi, through the hole in the stock sensor, and into the rail. Okay, once you get your screws in place, go ahead and screw them down enough till the top of the head is flush with the surface of the Kush Hi. Okay, and stop right there. Okay, now you can see over here that it's pretty flush. You're going to take your driver and you're going to do 5 half turns from here. That's the proper amount of tightness. The reason why I want you to count how many turns is if you tighten the screw too much, you're going to put premature pressure on the Kush Hi, which means that when you go to turn on your board, it's going to cause an error blink because it's registering that pre-pressure even before you put your foot on. By doing the correct number of turns on the screw, you're adding just enough pressure to keep this foot pad in place and not fall off during riding, but not too much pressure that you trigger that error. So again, with that machine head screw flush and flat, maybe a little bit more, there we go, you're going to do 5 half turns. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, actually 4, not 5. Go to the opposite one and do the same. It's flush, 4 turns, 4 half turns. 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. Okay, that's how it should look when you're done. That and like that. Okay, once you're done with that, you're going to grab the 2 smallest machine screws that come with the Kush Hi kit, put a little bit of super glue on the bottom of the head, and then insert 1 and 2. into the top here. Now, because those machine screws are really small, they're not going to go through the Kush Hi, and they're not going to hit the stock sensor or the rail. You're basically just inserting these into the Kush Hi to cap off these two holes, so that way moisture and dirt and debris doesn't get in there. Okay, once you're done with that, go ahead and turn on your board. Okay, so we have a normal blink. If you have an error blink code, that could mean that you tighten these two screws in the back too much. So we'll turn this off. Everything looks good. Okay, the last step you're going to do is go back to that same felt material, and you're going to basically take a thick strip of it and wrap it all the way across here, across the front, and around the side. Okay, so it's going to be a big, thick skirt of felt. Once you wrap that around, go ahead and trim the felt till it kind of follows the contour here, so you can kind of see how mine is shaped like that. Okay. The front you probably don't need to trim because it's pretty thick here. And then you can see here I also trimmed it a little bit here. Okay, and that's pretty much it. So that's exactly how I modified my Kush Hi. I've been running this for 800 plus miles, both pavement and off-road, and I've never had an issue. So now I'm going to go into some frequently asked questions that you guys probably have. So first thing that I've been asked is, so what is exactly securing the Kush Hi to the front? So again, it's just these two screws. So two in the back here. These two are just for show, and that's it. The two screws that are here on the front, they still go through the bumper and the stock sensor, but remember that sensor doesn't have any holes here. Let me bring this in the light. That sensor pad doesn't have any holes that pop up through there. So those screws are not going to pop up through and go into the Kush Hi. So essentially your front of your Kush Hi will kind of be flapping like this if you lift up on it. That being said, I've never ever had this thing come loose or fall off during riding. I ride pretty aggressively, and I've never had any issues. Because I don't really jump with my Kush Hi either, I've never had this thing fly up. There's always foot pressure from me on here, so that's never been an issue. If you're going to be doing a lot of jumping, maybe this might not be a modification for you. Okay, the grip tape here on the stock sensor rubbing against that felt that we added here to the bottom of the Kush Hi also kind of helps to prevent this pad from kind of fishtailing as you're carving left and right. It's very secure, and as I already said, you know, I've never had this thing fall off, and I've never had any issues. How about ghosting? So ghosting, if you don't know what that means, is there's no foot pressure from yourself on the foot pad, but the sensors are still registering some pressure, and if the board is turned horizontal enough, the board could launch itself forward without the rider, hence ghosting. That can usually happen if your two rear screws are too tight, but you know, the 4 turns of the screws here seems to be the magic number for me. You know, you may have a little bit different result, but that's what I've done to kind of solve the ghosting issue. Okay, so people have been asking, are there any other ways to get this foot pad to work in the front? Yes, there are 2 other ways. One way is to remove this Kush Hi, go to your stock sensor, remove the stock grip tape carefully, then you're going to remove the stock sensor, and you're going to transplant that sensor from your Plus or your XR onto the bottom of the Kush Hi. The Kush Hi, if you look here underneath and to the back, there's actually a cutout that Jeff has designed in there where you can kind of stick the pigtail of that sensor. The second way that I've heard of, and I actually included a link down for it below, is to use a version 1 sensor. So some people go ahead and take off their front foot pad, you know, set it to the side. They don't use any part of that foot pad. They don't even use that sensor. They go online, they buy a version 1 foot pad, version 1 sensor, and they transplant that sensor underneath the Kush Hi in the same method as I just described, and Jeff outlines that in the video below. If you want to see that tutorial, go ahead and click on that link. Why do I add this piece of felt all the way around most of the perimeter of this Kush Hi. Number one, I think the Kush Hi stacked on top of the stock sensor looks kind of ugly. You can kind of see here from the back that it's just not a very streamlined look. You're always going to have a little bit of a gap here in between. So by putting this piece of felt, it makes it look a little bit cleaner. And also, when I ride on the dirt, I'm preventing dirt from kind of sandwiching itself between the Kush Hi and the stock sensor. So this helps to keep out dirt and maybe a little bit of moisture too from entering between the two pads. Why do I put that thin piece of felt down the middle? Well, what I noticed was when I first got this Kush Hi, I went ahead and I just installed it directly onto my foot pad just by putting these two screws without any of the felt. What I noticed was the sensors were having a hard time activating when I tried to put my weight on it. So I would, lean back on my board, put my front foot here, and even with all my weight on my front foot, sometimes the sensor wouldn't register. And what that told me was there was a little bit of a gap between the Kush Hi and the stock sensor underneath, and because of that gap, it required a tremendous amount of pressure on my foot to activate that sensor. So we have to close that gap, and that's the purpose of that strip here, is to add a little bit of added thickness, so that way I have to push just a little bit here on the top, and then it registers the pressure onto the felt activates the sensor on the stock foot pad, and we're good to go. Another question I've had is, how come you don't put that thin piece of felt on the sides? Well, if you look here on the sides, the side of the Kush Hi is actually a little bit stiffer, I think, than the center. And also, for those of you with larger feet, your feet footprint tends to traverse the entire foot pad. So because of the concavity here, you don't have as much pressure pushing in the center, but you have a little bit more pressure pushing on the sides. If I was to add felt down to the sides, coupled with the added pressure from my foot profile, it would be adding too much pressure to the stock sensor and would cause a premature blinking error with the LED. So again, this required some experimentation on my part, and the measurements and cutouts of that felt that I went over at the beginning of the video seems to be the best solution that I've come up with. Okay, and lastly, is there any way to kind of get rid of this flapping here? I've never tried anything. I guess one solution would be, instead of adding felt, maybe you could add thick pieces of Velcro, so that way there's a little bit more gripping or sticking action. I don't know if putting glue between the two foot pads would work, but then again, I don't really want to keep the two foot pads permanently adhered together because sometimes I have to disassemble my board for travel, and doing so requires me to remove the Kush Hi first before removing the stock foot pad. So that's just kind of my take. There are other products out there, by the way, going on to the next question. Besides this method, are there any other foot pads that you can just simply adhere to the front without having to remove sensors or transplant sensors? Yes, I believe they are called Cobra pads. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but there is a pad out there. You can search it in the Onewheel owners group, where the whole idea is you keep your stock foot pad exactly on the board like I have here, and I think that aftermarket foot pad has a little bit of adhesive at the bottom. You peel the adhesive, stick it down there. I don't think there's any screws. I could be mistaken, but I've heard there's no other screws. And just that adhesive is enough to grip the two pieces of foot pads together. And from what I've heard, they do a good job. I chose not to get those because they did not have a sale during that time. And for me to get 2 foot pads for those brands would have cost me well over $150. I bought these 2 Kush Hi's during Black Friday. I got them for $50 each because there was a 50% off sale. So you just kind of have to do your homework and kind of time it right for yourself. And then lastly, how do I like the setup? I really enjoy it a lot. Obviously, these are much better foot pads than the stock ones that come with the board. The high kick, the better grip tape, and the concavity really helps your foot to not permanently stick, obviously, but definitely gives you a lot more gripping area, which allows you to both not only relieve some of that foot fatigue, but also to have a little bit more bite with your foot as you're going into turns. So as you're pushing on your heel, heel or you're pushing on your toes, you have a little bit more of this kick here to kind of grab those parts of your feet, so that way you feel more in control. The other benefit that I like about these is sometimes riding over off-road or sidewalks with the brakes in the sidewalks. If you have a small bump in the road, that could be enough to throw your foot off balance and could cause an accident. But with the design of these foot pads, it really helps me to grip a lot better and prevents me from losing my traction during those instances. All right, I also wanted to add some actual footage to show you that this whole setup does work. So again, here's the Kush Hi mounted on top of the stock sensor, just as we described earlier. I'm going to turn on the board. Okay, we'll go ahead and step on the board here. So just normal stance, nothing fancy. And then I'll go ahead and lift up my rear foot so you can kind of, or my front foot so you can kind of see the deactivation. So works just as normal. And then let's add some actual footage here of me riding it. Okay. So hopefully you got that dismount in the shot there. All right, so yeah, works pretty well. All right, guys, thanks for tuning in. Catch you on the next one.